Right. So far what we did is we have created a very simple repository end to end, and we have deployed it, and we have seen how do we use this repository to create a very basic report. Okay, so this is the end to end of our repository development. So now let's see now how do we actually modify our repository. So in the sense, if I want to do the changes to my repository, or if I want to do some enhancements to the repository, so what is the process, and how do we actually make this process work? So right, so let's open the repository which we have worked on already, and I'll show you the multiple options, like the different ways that we can modify a repository, and what kind of approach that we can follow, right? Okay, so this is my administration tool, and I would like to open the repository now. So I say open. Now if you see here, when I'm trying to open the repository, this is the repository location, right? So I'll just navigate to that location from here so that you'll have an idea. So then we'll come back. We will come back and see how do we actually go here, and how do we know that that our repository is available in this folder. So there is a navigation pattern that we follow. I'll explain it at a later point of time. So at this point of time, just make sure what I'm trying to show is I'm trying to show what is there in the repository now. So this is the repository folder in your folder system or a file system. And within the repository folder, if you see here, there is a sales underscore repo under sales repo underscore 001. So this is your actual repository, right? So the repository that you have developed. So now when you deploy this repository, sales repo 001, when you deploy this repository, if you see there is a one more repository that is created, sales repo underscore 001 underscore BA 0056. So BA 0056 is the repository that is actually deployed. This is the RPD file. So RPD file is the actual file. So these are the other files like text files and all. They are the kind of it's the changes that you're writing, right? I mean, whatever the changes that you're doing, they will add all those changes, because we have an option of commit and rollback, and those additional options will be there. I'll show you. So that's the reason any changes that you do, it's keep maintaining that the SAV file and text file. These are we don't really care about these SAV file and the text file. The server will take care of those things, and for us, all we really care is the RPD file. So the point that I'm trying to make it here, when you develop a repository, when you deploy a repository, you never ever use the same repository that you have deployed. In the sense, when I deployed sales repo underscore 001, my server will never use the sales repo 001, because sales repo 001 is the base repository that I am actually developing, which I developed. Okay, now when I deploy it, what it does, it makes a copy of the same repository with a counter. With a counter means, like, what is the uh, current repository that is deployed, and it will increment the extension by 1. So now sales repo underscore 001 underscore, now the counter is what? BI 0056. If you look at other repository, this is BI 0055, BI 0054, then 53, 52, 51. So what it will do is it will see what is the counter. Now counter is 56. Suppose if I deploy the sales repo 001 again, now one more time. Now what happens? It will create something called a BA001 57. Like that, now it will create multiple repositories. So now let's go back and try to deploy the repository, and I will see how it will actually work. So what is our repository? I'm going to open my repository. What? Sales repo 001. So the password for my repository is what? Welcome one. Remember what was the password that we have given at the time of repository creation. Right, so this is my repository, and say there are some changes. So my change is I'm going to delete this XYZ. Simple. I've deleted my XYZ. So since I've deleted my XYZ, the XYZ here in the presentation layer also is deleted. So it says save. Do you wish to check global consistency? Global consistency is nothing but, it's kind of a compilation. So when you are saying global consistency means you are checking if your repository is good or not. I mean, when I say good, is the repository uh, technically right in the sense it will validate certain things, and if the validation is good, then it will say consistent. If there are any errors, then it will give you the warnings or errors, whatever that is there. So I'm kind of checking. It has verified and set consistency, fixed certain objects. There are no errors, warnings, or best practice violations left to report. So there's nothing means your repository is good. So now I have modified my repository sales repo 001.rpd, okay, with some changes. So now what I would like to do is I would like to deploy the same changes again. So my user is WebLogic, password is welcome, and everywhere we use the same user password and for now. Okay, so let's go to the business intelligence. So just try to kind of get used to this navigation. So it's important. So when you practice that, so you'll get to understand this navigation. When you're navigating, right, just try to make some logic. Okay, now where am I going? Where is from where I am selecting and all. Okay. Now this is my application, which is the enterprise manager application that is deployed onto my WebLogic. So now what is that I'm going to do is within this application, which is a core application that is deployed onto this server, there is a tab which is a deployment tab, and within the deployment tab I have something called a repository. So now what is the current repository that is running on the server? Sales repo underscore 001 underscore, what is the counter? BA0056. Okay, now what I want to do is I would like to simply unlock. When I say edit and lock and edit configurations, click OK, which means I am locking this screen at the same time. I am kind of maintaining the session of these changes. So I can go to any tab and I can do any changes. Every tab you have kind of an apply. So I do some change here, apply. I do some change in the tab, apply. I do some change in the tab, apply. Which means I have done 3 different changes in 3 different tabs. Now, if I want to commit all these 3 changes together to my server, then I simply say activate. If I don't want to commit all the changes, if I want to roll back everything and put it back to normal, release configuration. So it's a kind of activate changes is like committing the changes, committing all the changes in a one go. So it's as a group, committing the changes as a group. Okay, so now what I would like to do is I would like to go for a repository file. So what is my repository file? BA001, right? So remember, when you're deploying, sometimes you see the other files, right? Don't deploy those files. So you have to always deploy the RPD file only. So my RPD file is of 7 KB. So I select this one and say open. And I need to provide my password of my repository, because without the password, my server does not actually be able to use the repository. So I give my username and password. There is no validation at this point of time. You need to understand. So don't think that I click apply and it is not giving any error. So it's not valid. I mean, the password is right, so it doesn't require to be. You give any junk also, it will take, because at this point of time it is not validating the password. The server will validate the password while opening the repository. So if you give the wrong password, when you start the server will fail to start, because in the validation process, server failed to open the repository with the password provided. Okay. Now, so now once my repository selected password is given, I need to say apply, so that for this particular screen these changes are recorded internally. The changes are recorded. If you see here, sales repo 001, the counter is increased to what? BA0057. Now I go back to my folder. See, if I say refresh, do I see anything called BA0057? No BA00. It is only 56 I am having, which means the changes that I've applied are only applied in the memory or in a temporary of my enterprise manager. So actually it has not created any new repository called BA0057. So now what is it I'm going to, so far it's not created. So what is it I'm going to do now? I'm going to activate my changes. So activate is a kind of a commit. Whatever the change that you have done, you're just committing this change. So what does my activate change will do? Actually, the activate change will update the configuration files of your OBIEE. So whatever the configuration files that OBIEE internally uses or BA server internally uses, those configurations file will be updated with the changes that you have done. So you update the configuration files. So for the next step, as I told you, if I have to make that configurations work, if I have to make that configuration changes work, so what I need to do, I need to actually restart my server, because when I restart the server, then only my server will use the new configuration. So it's kind of, the server is very traditional. What it will do is, it will actually, it's based on a configuration file. The server startup will be based on a configuration file, which I call it as an initial file, INI file. Okay, so now anyways, I have activated my changes. If I go back to my folder again, if I see here, what happened? There is a new repository created. So up till now, there is no repository, but when you activate the changes, what happens? It creates the repository, which means it creates a copy of the same repository with a different name. See, it's both 7 KB. It creates a copy of the same repository with a different name. It will start using this repository, which is created BA0057, for the usage of the server. So who will use this repository? Only server will use this repository. Now when any changes that you want to do, you will do on what? You'll do on a sales repo 001, and you deploy the changes. And again, next time it will create something called BA0058. It's kind of a version control. So tomorrow something goes wrong, and suppose I did 10 changes now to my repository, I deployed it, and what it has done, it has created a new repository called BA0058. Okay, now it will start using the BA0058, but when I start the server, and when I look at the reports, right, so I'm not happy with the reports. Now if the requirement is a rollback, so my business says, no, it's all mess now, we got messed it up, guys, roll back. So now when we say rollback, and what is the process of rolling back? And because in a production, if you do not like something, and if something is, you think, not working, now what do you need to do when I have to roll back? All I need to do is simply come back again and deploy the repository BA0057, which is working repository. So that is also a repository. Don't think that it cannot be deployed. I can deploy the same repository BA0057 to my server. Now it will create what? BA0059, because 58 is not working, right? So you're not really bothering about 58. So you have the 57, and you deployed the 57 again, it will create 59, which is a copy of the 57. So that's kind of, you maintain the version control. So now so this is a 57 that is created now, which means my server is using 57, not yet. My server is not yet using 57, but again, yes, in the configuration files, my server is configured to use 57. But when these configurations will get affected? When I restart my server. So now let's go and restart my server. So how do I restart my server? I can go to my browser, and the enterprise manager. I can go to my overview and availability, any of these two. In the overview, I have an option to restart the. So I simply click on the restart, then it will restart the server. That is one option. So the other option is command line utility. So I can say restart here, it will automatically restart. And I have another option which is command line utility. So where is my command line utility? So I can open another window. So there is a C. This is my Oracle BIE installation, OBIEE installation location. Okay, within that I have what? Instances. Within that instance, I have the instance 1 or 2. I mean, if you have installed, then usually you'll have the instance 1. Okay, within the instance, you have something called a bin. Bin is your executable folder. So this is a bin. So this is your path where you have the OPM and CTL. So basically, what we call it as an Oracle Process Manager. Okay. Okay, just to give you more detail on this, this is an Oracle application server 10G instance. So what is this Oracle Process Manager? Oracle Process Manager is a Oracle application server 10G instance. So Oracle App Server. So it's kind of an application server, like a WebLogic, right? Oracle application server is also one of the server. So now, I mean, I'll give you a little brief, like, why exactly there's two servers, right? So now we are saying WebLogic, now we are saying in application server, but we are calling it as an Oracle Process Manager. Okay, so too many things involved here, like, what is for what, right? So I'll give you a little history in brief. So technically speaking, in OBIEE 10G, if I call it as a previous version of OBIEE, or I can say even I don't think Civil Analytics has application server. So in OBIEE 10G, basically it's the server is Oracle application server 10G is used. Okay, and when I use my Oracle application server 10G, the process that actually managing the server, we call it as an OPMN, Oracle Process Manager. It's a kind of a process name that will actually run when I use my application server. So when they use OBIEE 11G, what they did is they did not disturb any of these things. They kept everything as it is. Okay, and what Oracle has done is they simply added a WebLogic. They simply added another server, which is a WebLogic here, right? And what they said is, okay, let's not worry about fully migrating everything to the WebLogic, because there are some customers already using all this, and we do not really want to mess up with their existing setups and all the stuff. So what we do is we simply use this as it is, and but again we use a WebLogic for the compatibility, and whatever that is possible, we deploy those things into our WebLogic, like, what I say, web applications, whatever the web applications that we have, right? So we deploy all those web applications to our WebLogic. So that's what the plan. Now, as per the plan, what Oracle has moved to here is they moved analytics, which is the reporting part. They've created one more thing, which is called an enterprise manager, which is the deployment part, and obviously console, which is technically original WebLogic feature. So console, irrespective of whether you use OBIEE or not, WebLogic has a kind of a console. So they have moved all these three features into the WebLogic few more additional applications. Now what they said is, okay, now WebLogic will actually interface, and internally WebLogic will communicate with the this particular OBIEE instance, which I call it as an Oracle Process Manager. So now core of your Oracle BI reports are actually executed inside your Oracle Process Manager. So 90% of the execution, 90% of the runtime work is done by whom? Oracle Process Manager. And only WebLogic is interfacing. So all Enterprise Manager, analytics, where you create the reports and everything is done managed at the WebLogic. But the core server is actually a Oracle Process Manager, which is a OPMN process that is actually running. So now technically we are running two servers. So this I call it as an instance. Internally, whatever the instance one or instance two that you see, this is what. So in the folder structure you have something called instance, right? Instances, instance one. So I can have more than one instance at this point of time. There is only one instance that I'm using. This is the instance. So inside the instance you see there are couple of servers that is available. So inside, if you go to the BI Foundation, these are the different servers that is available. So now within the application server, within the Oracle Process Manager, right? You know, the server of your OBIEE 10G our instance that is actually running is having the 5 servers. Okay, one core important server is Oracle BI server. Second important is Oracle presentation server. So there is a BA server, there is a presentation server, and third is Oracle scheduler. Fourth is Java host. Fifth is Oracle cluster controller. These are the 5 servers, our internal process that is running. So now if you install kind of SBase and all, it will also have one more server like an SBase one, which will be available. Okay, so now what we actually then we'll have one more thing called an SBase server or something will be deployed. Okay, so let's not worry about these things at this point of time. I have the 5 different servers running. So my OPMN process is nothing but what? My OPMN process is a process that is handling these 5 servers. So 5 different services running. So you can manage these 5 services with the OPMN. So Oracle Process Manager is the process which is a collection of these 5 servers. Okay, now out of these 5 servers, we will actually bother about only these 2. Rest of the 3 we don't really care at this point of time. We don't really technically use most of the time. But again, so important server is the BA server, other is the presentation server. So BA server is the core server that will handle our repository. So all our repository execution and all the stuff is managed by the BA server. If you remember the architecture, the request comes to the presentation server, the request goes to the BA server. So we have told you, right? So these are the 2 servers that actually will be participating actively in our query processing and the logical query creation and all the stuff. So anyway, we'll discuss what this servers does and all at a later point of time. At this point of time, assume that there are 5 servers. So now when I want to stop and start all these servers, I use the OPMN. So technically speaking, as a developer, like, we don't really need to go to this level and manage these things and all. And you do not even need to know that there are 2 different server process available in OBIEE. So you keep doing the actual development and you continue to develop the repository, deploy, that should work fine. But the reason I'm giving you all these details is we need to know, right, there is some thing in the server running, like, how to manage that thing. And if something goes wrong, where do you go, and where is the log files available, where is the query logs available, where is the configuration files available, though you don't directly go and modify them manually. But again, so you should be aware like in what it is doing internally. Then only if something goes wrong tomorrow, if something is not working, you're confident and you have an idea. Okay, so this I'm not able to see, which means okay, it could be the problem with this server. So then you'll go there and you'll verify the log file of the server, and you'll troubleshoot and you'll fix this one. So that's kind of a comfort and confidence you should have. That is the reason I'm kind of elaborating what exactly happens inside. So technically there are two servers, WebLogic and the OPMN. OPMN I also call it as an instance. So whatever the instance that I have inside my OBIEE. So there's two servers technically running, and one is a WebLogic, other is the Oracle application server, and all the OBIEE processing, query processing that is done by the this OPMN process, only interfacing like creation of the reports and enterprise manager. So that is the reason I told you, even when this OPMN is not running, suppose if somewhere somebody asked like what if my server is not running, if my repository is wrong and deploy it, and when I'm starting the server is not starting. So remember, when you deploy the repository, if the server is not starting, it is the OPMN that is not starting. This is your Oracle BA server that is not starting. This is not the WebLogic. WebLogic will continue to run because this is a different server. WebLogic will continue to run. My enterprise manager is deployed onto my WebLogic. So though the server is failing to start, but I can still deploy another repository from the enterprise manager because my enterprise manager is on the WebLogic. Okay, so you should have that kind of understanding. So now, so going back, what is that I'm trying to do? I'm trying to restart my server, which means I'm trying to restart all these services. Okay, so now if I have to restart the services, and I need to go to my bin, which is OPMNCTL, which is a command line utility of my OPMN process. Okay, so now what is that? I have taken this path and I will go to my command prompt. So I'll run as administrator. This is my command prompt. So I'll navigate to my folder, which is the bin folder. So I've navigated to my folder. Okay, now from here, what is that I would like to use my OPMNCTL. So I say OPMNCTL. So this is a command where now after this I can say I can give options. Suppose if I say enter, now it is giving me the options that is available because I have not given the flag, right? So within the OPMNCTL I can do a start all, stop all, shutdown, status. So these are all the different command line commands that I can give. So with the different flags. Okay. So let's only look at a couple of those now. So we'll see the status now. We'll understand the status of all our 5 services that is running, or 6 services that is running. Because if you install the SBase also, then it will have an SBase it will create 2 more services, I think. Okay, so status will display the status of those services. Stop all will stop all the services. Start all will start all the services. So these are the commands. Okay, so now I say clear. So I can say OPMN CTL status. Now it is showing me like I have my 3, 5, 7. So I told you that there are 2 services for the SBase running. Okay, let's not worry about those services at this point of time. Okay, so now I have my 5 services. One is Oracle BA server, presentation server, Java host, scheduler, cluster controller. Okay, 5 services. Now I would like to restart my services because why would I like to restart my services? Because I have deployed my new repository. When I deployed my new repository, my configurations are changed, and if I want my configurations to be effective, and a restart is required. So obviously I say OPMN CTL. First I need to stop all, which means all my 7 services will be stopped. So enter. This is the command line. So now if I go to my enterprise manager, within my enterprise manager, if I say restart, that's what it internally does. It's the same thing that it does. It will stop all the services and start all the services. But again, it's a command line utility is kind of a bit faster, so it's quick, so it's done. Okay, now again I say if I So now suppose if I stopped it, right? If I go and if I click on my core application again, if it get the current status, it should show that all my 5 services are running. So but my remember my enterprise manager is still running. So enterprise manager is running on the WebLogic. It has got nothing to do with our actual BA server. Okay, let's see. It should show that all the 5 servers are down. All the 5 processes has done. I think I can say. See now, all this are down because I have stopped the server. So now see, even though the server is down and my core application, my enterprise manager is still accessible because that is on the WebLogic. So that kind of difference I would like you guys to understand. So you need to understand how they are related, why I should be able to deploying another repository even if it is kind of BA server is down. So you need to correlate and you should be in a position to answer all these kind of questions to yourself. Then only you'll master. OPM and CTL. Now what do I need to do? I need to start. So say start all. What is that I'm doing? I'm technically starting. So I'm showing more on technical level, like more in detail. That's fine. I mean, if you find it like more technical, let's not worry about these things. It's not really required for the day-to-day work. Just for your information. Okay, so now I have started all my start also very quick, right? Just a matter of like 2-3 seconds or 10 seconds max. It's starting all the services, but the browser is a little lagging. So, but the advantage with the browser is you don't really need to log into your server. You don't really need to open the command prompt, and you don't really need to have the physical access to the server. So at this point of time, I'm restarting from my laptop because my server is running on my laptop. But again, in real time, my server will be running on somewhere, right? So now first I have to take a remote, or I can first have to connect through my to my server through a putty or something, and then I have to give the password. So which I need to have the access to my physical server. So with the password, so they I need to provide those things. But again, with the WebLogic. Um, with the browser restart, what we are doing, we're not actually requiring any physical access to the server. What I'm doing is I'm simply restarting it from my browser. That's kind of a cloud feature. Okay, so even administrator doesn't really require to log into my server. Simply click on this restart, it will restart. So it may take some time for the status to change. Yes, restart will apply the recent changes, whatever the changes that you have done. Doesn't does restart apply recent changes? No. See, this is how it works. When you restart the server, right? The server gets restarted. While it is getting restarted, it will load the new configurations. When it loads the new configurations, new things will be applied to the server. So, suppose now I deploy a new repository. Currently, the repository is X. So, assuming that I deployed a repository Y. So now what happens? My server configuration file changed it, saying that okay, now the configuration is changing to Y because they have deployed the new repository. So now my configuration file is having a repository configured what Y. So Y is there in the configuration file, but it's still using X because the server doesn't know that there is a configuration file change. Only you know. So now if the server has to know, you need to restart the server because the server will only read the new configuration at the startup. So when I'm starting the server, what happens? It will read the configuration file and it doesn't really bother about what you have done and all. It will verify. It will see what is the repository that is there in the configuration file. Now the repository in the configuration file is what? Y. Simple. It will load the Y to the server. Simple. So the restart will does both. How will we manage changes on same repository in case of multi? So there is another how deployment happens in a multi-user environment. See, that's what you say, you have a lock screen, right? So in a multi-user, you cannot deploy um, more than one person cannot deploy a repository at a time. So there's a lock, and if you try to deploy again, it will have its screen. But again, doesn't matter, right? It's kind of, suppose even both users are deploying. Um, if you apply someone, suppose if deploy now and activate the changes. Now somebody else deployed and activate the changes. Whichever is the first activation happens, those I mean, whichever is the latest activation that happens, it will use that particular file. But again, that doesn't really happen. So there won't be multiple deployments happens, because there is only one admin will manage, right? So when the changes are not like, you randomly keep doing the changes. You always do the changes in a coordinated way, right? So the changes are done by the admin. So obviously when you have done some changes, you don't go and deploy, and you provide this changes to your administrator, where the OBIEE administrator will deploy the changes for you. So that's how it works. Right, so one tricky thing here is when you restart the server from the command line, you see that there is a restart to apply recent changes still there, but you can ignore because you know that you have restarted the server. Okay, so now that's where the server restart is all about, where we can apply the recent changes. If I see my deployment now, so what is my kind of repository? BA0057. Like that, I can every time I deploy my repository, I see a new entry. Now, so I would like to do my changes again, assuming. So now I do my changes again. So I deploy it. It will create what? It will create another repository BA0058. Then there is some change. Again, I do some changes and deploy it BA0059. So it's kind of, I keep creating and I keep restarting. And it's creating a new server, new repository instance. So that doesn't really make much sense, right? Because there's too much of deployment. Every small change that I do or everything that I change, right? So probably it's kind of an unnecessary process, where every time you do some change, small, minor, doesn't matter, small, big, any change that you do, you're required to restart. So that doesn't really make much sense. So that's the reason what we do is there is another process which is called, online online mode. So within the OBIEE we have two there is a process called, online offline. Okay, so I'll explain what is an online offline. So if you look at here, this is your repository. Suppose say when I develop my repository, how do I develop my repository? I develop my repository um, using my administration tool. So I'll just go and use my BI administration. Okay, so now I use my BI administration, where I develop my repository. And this is my BI administration, which I am developing my repository. Right. So now this I call it as an offline mode. I call this as an offline mode, where I develop my repository. Okay, it's kind of I'm directly accessing this file and modifying. Okay, now now who will be actually using this file? So my BA server, obviously, right? So this is a kind of a developing the repository, but just developing the repository makes no sense, because somebody has to use it and somebody has to run it. Suppose if I write a Java program or C program, writing a program is fine. So I'm a very skilled person and I've written a very great program, but that doesn't mean we can actually use that. I mean, unless you actually use that program and run in a server, you don't see any output of that program. So my repository is created with an instructions. So my repository has to be configured inside my server, which is my BA server. So my BA server will be, after the deployment, what happens? My BA server will be reading this. My BA server will be using this repository for every request that is received from the user. So every time there is a request, there is a report executed, my BA server always use this repository to process that particular report, because conversion of a logical to physical and from physical, logical to physical is done by the presentation server. But again, no, creation of the logical request is done by the presentation server, and conversion of the logical to physical is done by the BA server, and sending the request to the server database and getting the data from the source is done by the BA server. So basically, my BA server is a core process that will be used to read and kind of process the request with the help of the repository. So this is offline mode. So now this process will do what? This process is an offline mode where you develop the repository, but again there is an additional process that you use, which is called an enterprise manager, something like this, where you use the enterprise manager. Using the enterprise manager, what do? You simply deploy your repository to the BA server. Okay, so this is a traditional process. But again, within the traditional process, every time there is a change in the requirement, or every time there is a change in the repository, I come back here, I modify the repository. Repository is modified. Then I go back to the enterprise manager and take the new repository, deploy it, and it is deployed onto the server. So it's a kind of a cycle every time I follow. But unfortunately, in every cycle, I need to restart my server, because there is a dependency in my BA server, which it cannot load a new repository unless there is a restart. So that's the reason every time you have to restart it, because when you restart it, then only it can read the configuration file. When it reads the configuration file, then only it will load the new repository. Okay. Now, so to avoid this process, what we're actually trying to do is we are actually using my BA administration tool, or OBIEE designer, or I can say, to directly modify the repository. So directly modify the repository that is already configured. So now what happens is, you need to, it's a little bit tricky, you need to understand. So now, though I am showing it as a repository, as an additional kind of additional object, but when I restart the server, what happens? What is the time we are doing? We configured our repository in the configuration file. When I restart the server, my server will load the repository into it. It's a file, right? It will load into the server. So the server process will load the repository. So the repository is sitting here inside the server. Okay. Technically speaking, but again, for our easier understanding, I've given it as a two different things. But when you deploy it, it's a part of the server only. Okay. Now, what is that I'm trying to do is, this is, suppose this is yeah, so this is the same repository. So the diagrammatical representation, I've shown it this, but this is the actual repository that is sitting inside it. So now, so what is that I'm trying to do is, so why am I restarting the server? If you have to understand, I'm restarting the server because there is a changes done in my repository outside of my server, and I want those changes to be effective. So which means there is changes in the repository which my server does not know. I've developed somewhere and I've kept the file. Okay. Now when I deploy, then only my configuration file will get updated. Then only I'll be able to kind of use this new repository after the restart. So every time I restart, and if there is a change in the configuration file, my server will load the new repository file. Now, instead of doing the changes outside and restarting the server to let the server know, what we will try to do is we'll do the changes, and we'll let the server itself modify the changes and apply the changes to the repository. So we open the repository that is available on the server now. So there is an additional way of doing it is what? Rather than opening any repository and modifying the changes, we connect to the server and we open the repository that is currently being used by the server. So what is currently being used by the server? BI0057. Okay, so we open the repository and we open the server that is currently being used by the BA server. Now we do the changes. So when we do the changes, we let the BA server to save the changes. When we open, so everything we directly operate on the repository, and every change that we do, we tell the BA server. So now if I'm doing some change, I'm directly doing the changes and the change in the repository that is available in the BA server, and I'm asking my BA server to do those changes. So whenever I do my change, I'm letting my BA server know that there is a change. This is what the change is. So my BA server is aware of the new change. Now, when I actually modify my repository in the online mode, I call it as an online mode, I do not really need to restart my server. My changes are instant because I'm directly doing the change on the repository that is configured on the server. And my BA server or my OBIEE server is also aware of the changes that I have done, because the BA server itself is doing the changes, or making the changes to the, or saving the changes to the repository. So that's what I call it as an online mode. So if I would like to modify my repository in real time, I quickly do the changes in real time, I use my online mode. So if I'm doing my development of my repository, like if I'm developing something from scratch, or if I'm having kind of a couple of changes, major changes. So now what I'll do, I'll go for the offline mode. If I have new development, a new repository development that I'm doing, or if I'm doing major changes, then I go for the uh, offline mode. But again, if my change is very small, all I want to do is simply quickly do a quick change by adding some calculation or modifying some value. So I can directly go and deploy the directly go and open the repository in online mode and simply do the changes. Okay, that's what I call it as an online mode. So let's see how do we actually use the online mode. Alright, so this is my repository. So the repository name is what? Sales repo 001. So I close my repository. Okay, so if you see here, there is a two things available. That is one open offline. There is a blue one, open online. So when I use the blue one, what is that I'm trying to do? I'm trying to open my repository in online. When I say open online, so what is my repository password? My repository password is a welcome one. Here, remember, it is not asking my repository to select. Am I selecting a repository that I want to open? No. Why? As I told you, at any point of time, there is only one repository deployed. So you don't have more than one repository deployed. So there is no reason for you to select the repository name, because whatever the repository that is configured on the server right now, so that repository will be open. Simple. Okay, so no need of selection. But in offline mode, it will open a repository folder. It will show you all the repositories that is available. Because in offline mode, what you're doing, you're actually opening the repository and you're actually modifying the repository, a particular repository. So now this is your repository password, and you don't need to select the repository, and you need to provide the WebLogic username password, because enterprise manager and everything is running. Everything is running on the WebLogic, right? So if my administration tool needs to connect to the server and open, I need to provide the password of my WebLogic. So my WebLogic password is also welcome one. We'll discuss these the bottom one at a later point of time. This tells where my BA server running. So this connection, right? This is a connection of my BA server, because this is my BA server, right? This is a connection of my BA server. My BA administration tool needs to know where is my BA server running. So this particular configuration talks about connection where my BA server running. So when I say open, what happens? Using this connection, my administration tool will connect to my repository with the help of the username, password, WebLogic, and welcome one, and then it will open the repository that is running on the server with a password. Okay. Open. See, this is my repository. But what is the difference here? So do you see what is the repository that you're modifying? No, I don't see. So, but what is the difference here is your changes are quick. Your changes are real time. So I'll tell you how. So now let's go and create a very simple and quick report now. So I'm going to open my analytics. Remember, analytics is what? Analytics is reporting tool, reporting utility available in the OBIEE, reporting application available in OBIEE. So I go to I log in with the user web logic and say sign in. Right. So now I would like to create what? I would like to create a very simple report. So I go to the analysis. Say I want to use east. So east or west, any subject area. Okay. Say I would like to use my brand. I would like to use my revenue. So what is it I'm doing? I'm using a brand column and I'm doing a revenue column as a results. Right. So see my revenue is actually showing individual rows because there is no aggregation defined on the column. Since there is no aggregation defined on the column, my query is not aggregating. It's like selecting, but not doing any, but not using any sum function or kind of an order by function. Okay. So that's the reason it's not aggregating. It's a simple basic query. Now my requirement is I would like to define some aggregation on my revenue, right? So let me save this report first. I'm gonna save this report with different names. Suppose I'm gonna create a new folder called test. Okay, within my test, I'll explain you like what is this folder structure and all. We'll see when we see the catalog. But for now, um, test report. Okay, I created one report which is called test report, just for our understanding. Okay, so now this is now the report is saved somewhere. So the criteria, the requirement, the report is saved. When I say report is saved, remember one fundamental thing: the result is not saved. Only the metadata, the kind of the query is saved. So the definition of the report is saved, not the actual result. So there is nowhere in OBIEE we save the results. Okay, that's something that you need to remember. Okay, so this is my test report, and I say run, open, and I can see the same result which I saw before, right? Simple. Now I want to define an aggregation on this so that I can see this sum of my all my values for the BizTech, the total revenue for the BizTech, which is sum of all those for the BizTech. Now let me go and modify my repository to use my aggregation. So what is that where do I want to define my aggregation? On the revenue column, I would like to define my aggregation. So I double click on my revenue column, and you see there is a general, there is an aggregation. So when I say aggregation, so default aggregation rule is nothing. There is no aggregation. So now I can choose any aggregation, sum, average, minimum. So depending on the aggregation that I do, my calculation will be done. In the sense, suppose if I say sum, it will summarize all the values for the BizTech. If I say average, it will display the average value of all the rows that is available for the BizTech, something like. So I choose sum for now. I say okay. See, the moment I do the changes, there is a tick mark available. So what does it tick mark means? This is the change that happened to your repository, because when you're opening the repository and modifying the repository online mode, every change is tracked. Okay, so that is what my online is, because I'm doing the change live. I'm doing the change live. So the process is, again, it will capture all the changes like this. So whatever the changes that you're modifying, right, you do modify your changes, and it will track your record. Suppose I have LOB, I would like to say line of business. Okay, I did some change. So this is one change. Like that, any change that you do, like these tick marks that you checked out the object products, and this is kind of registered, saying okay, these are the changes. Now if you see at this point of time how many changes I have done, 2 changes I have done. So these are all the objects where tick marks are checked out, means opened for the editing. So I have modified kind of. So now once my change is done, when I'm happy with my change, so I need to do what? Check-in. Check-in is basically committing your changes. Checkout is kind of opening the object for the modification, and once you modified the object, check-in. Okay, so it's kind of hotel. So you have a check-in, check-out, right? So Check-in means you're inside the hotel, so you're safe. Which means your work is done. You're back, and you're back in a hotel, so you're untouched. Suppose say checkout means you're going out, and probably know you're going. You never know, like you're going different places and doing things. Anything can happen to you. So same like if you check out and you modify you keep doing the changes, right? So it is prone to errors, and it's prone to change. Okay, now once you are happy with your change and you say check in, then the new changes are committed. Say check in. So what it's saying, it is saying that you want to commit your changes, but again doesn't mean that I do some crap and I do some wrong changes and trying to apply those changes to the server. Does the server will accept? No. Even when you're applying the changes, what it will do, my server will verify if the changes are valid, kind of compilation. If the changes are valid and if the changes are acceptable to the server or BA server, then only it will commit the changes. Otherwise, it will give error. So if my consistency, if it is consistent, then only I'll be able to apply. So then only it will apply. Otherwise, it won't apply. So it will give error. So I've committed my changes and I say save. Now I go back to my report now. I'm not doing anything. Am I restarting my server? No. I say refresh. See, my report is changing. Now instead of displaying the individual rows, what it is doing, it is displaying the summarized data. So because my revenue is having what? My revenue is having a new thing which is called sum. So I modified my repository in online mode, which my changes are live. So anything that I do here, any change that I do here, I can simply see this change. Suppose if I go and modify my revenue from count to sum to say max, say apply. I check in my change. I'm committing my change. Yes. And I'm saving my repository. Now, if you see here, just kind of, you don't really need to count the number, but say 21, right? 21, 17, 11, something like that. So I said refresh. See, it's only giving one value, which is 586. So maximum of my BizTech revenue, any one revenue, which is the maximum revenue. So because I have given my kind of aggregation tool as max, it will take the maximum value out of all the rows and display. Sum will sum everything. So any change that I do here, I can quickly verify without restarting my server. That is online mode. So that is the difference between the online mode and the offline mode. Okay, right. So I'm gonna wrap it up for today. Tomorrow we'll start looking at the repository development. We'll start explore more on the repository. So we'll see how to create alias tables and how do we create the logical columns on our own, dimensions on our own, and all the stuff. So we'll kind of explore more on the repository part. And this is basically, I just wanted to give you end-to-end understanding of how the things happen. So we'll start exploring more in terms of repository development and changes that requires to be done, and how do we do the changes and all. Okay. So any questions before we wrap it up?
Hey Dinesh, this is Senthil Dinesh. Dinesh, one quick question. Actually, you saved this one online, right? How do you take a copy of that and store it in your local to do more changes?
You can do, suppose say, okay, good question. If you see, this is online, you do some changes. Tomorrow you think you want to do these changes on top of this repository. I can go to my file. This is online mode, right? I can say copy as, say, repository. I can copy the same repository with a different name if I want. I can give any name. Or I can still override the same sales repo 001. I say save. Do you want to replace? Yes. So now if I open my repository in offline mode, I'm also going to see this revenue change in the offline, because I have copied the repository that is on the server to the offline. Right.
You were saving at 001, right? So you said there is a rollback function where it creates a counter 57, 58 and all. So okay, I did a change and I was working on 58. say that I want to go back to 57, in that time, do I need to
You need to redeploy the
uh,
57 again.
make the change on 00?
Your voice is breaking. But again, I understand. Suppose say now you have 58. Now you have 57. Right now I did some change, 57. So I'm not happy with the change that is in the 57. So what I can do is I
So,
can go to the 56 and I deploy the 56 again to the server. 56 is also a repository. It's not that this cannot be deployed. This can be deployed. I can't hear Senthil. I don't know if you're talking or not. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? Okay. Then perfect, guys.